Happy New Year, everyone. I'm John, host of Video Games in the World, and I wish you all the best in this 2025 right now. So, as my first video of today, the first video of 2025, what I'm going to give you is a preview of my upcoming essay of Cartoon Network. This is an updated version of The Arrival of Toonami, so enjoy. While Nickelodeon had its popularity with both live action and animated shows, Cartoon Network was truly shining with all these old school cartoons from the 1930s all the way to the 1980s, and especially with all the cartoon shows. Now, when it comes to action-themed cartoons like superheroes and adventures, in the early days of the network, the action-themed cartoons were Johnny Quest, Space Ghost, Shazam, the Herculoids, Galtar, Thundar the Barbarian, Captain Planet and the Planeteers, etc. That afternoon segment was called Super Adventures, and then in 1995 there was the Power Zone. Johnny Quest would have a more modernized reboot of the series titled The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, which was an absolute success. The Power Zone brought Japanese anime to Cartoon Network such as G-Force, Guardians of Space, Speed Racer, Robot Carnival, and so on. But then, in 1997, there will be an afternoon segment that featured action-themed cartoons, and then it will make Japanese anime even more popular than it already was. That afternoon scheduled programming on Cartoon Network was called Toonami. When it first started, it was known as the Moltar era. Toonami was Cartoon Network's primary action animated block. The block premiered on March 17, 1997 with Thundercats, Cartoon Roulette, Voltron, another episode of Roulette, and The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest respectively as its first programs. Toonami was originally a spin-off of Space Ghost Coast to Coast and aired weekday afternoons. The block was originally hosted by Space Ghost villain turned producer Moltar at the Ghost Planet Industries building from March 17, 1997 to July 9, 1999. In 1999, the Tom era had begun, and it was not just action animation shows from the 1980s and early to mid 1990s anymore. That is when anime would take over. It was a Japanese invasion. With Moltar gone, a new host had arrived. A robot named Tom had become the new host of Toonami. Soon afterwards, the first program of the Tom era, the Sailor Moon episode, Sailor Mercury Moving On, premiered. It introduced the Powerpuff Girls on Toonami, becoming the first Cartoon Network original series on the block. Also introduced that day was the Midnight Run, a late-night block. It was originally a 5-hour Saturday night block at midnight Eastern until March 2000, when it moved to weeknights in an hour-long format until January 2003. The anime shows that premiered on Toonami in 1999 were Sailor Moon, Voltron, Robotech, The Big O, Gundam Wing, Outlaw Star, and the crown jewel, Dragon Ball Z. What was also introduced in 1999 was Midnight Run, a late-night block. Midnight Run tended to have more blood and violence than its daytime counterpart, even running an uncut version of Gundam Wing between March and November 2000. Toonami would bring more anime in the 2000s, and that's where it would thrive, as it had anime shows such as Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT, Ronin Warriors, Fist of the North Star, Gundam Seed, Satch Bell, Pokemon Chronicles, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Card Captors, Gigantor, Naruto, One Piece, and even non-anime shows like The Batman, Justice League Unlimited, Teen Titans, Megas XLR, IGPX, and the 2002 reboot of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Toonami was truly crushing it with all the anime and action animated shows that aired. The first run of Toonami ended in 2007, but it would later return as part of Cartoon Network's late-night segment Adult Swim in 2012. In the 1990s, networks like Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and MTV were the entertainment industry. The 1990s and early to mid-2000s was a golden age of Cartoon Network, but it couldn't last forever.